I wanted to do it this way because I wasn't sure where our knot was going to be, and this actually can help strengthen the top knot. Just feeding it through. Take your time with this. There is no rush here, as always. All right, guys, so now I finished wire wrapping my ring, and I'm gonna finish it off by just wrapping it around the opening top part of our ring, just making circular bands that are pretty straight, pretty even looking. If you wanna do it a little bit more kind of kooky and bohemian looking, that'll look great too. And I'm using my small, tiny pliers for this because it's super detailed work. This part is just gonna hide any edges of our wire, and I'm gonna feed it through the hole at the top of our ring, turning my ring under. You can always press it down to give it a more seamless look. And the final test is to try it on. And if it's like a dream, that's great. It looks beautiful and interesting. So I'm just gonna go ahead and set it aside with our bracelet. We're gonna play around with those later, but first we need to do a little bit more prep work for this. So a next big part of our chain ring bracelet is the chain. And we're not gonna use any store-bought materials for any of our projects, because we want you to learn how to make everything homemade, and it's gonna be awesome and just as good as you would buy it in store, and it's gonna be way cheaper. So what I have today is my drill. It has an attachment that's a step-down ring sizer, and we're going to make our own jump rings. So I'm just gonna take a piece of wire and cut it. And I want small jump rings because I think it looks more fashionable, and the proportions for what we're doing is going to be great. Make sure that your holes are totally facing completely straight up. Now I'm going to insert from the top. Notice that this little edge here is barely peeking through. I'll tell you why in a second. And then I'm going to go 90 degrees down, as tight as I can. Now, the reason why I want only a little bit peeking through is because my fingers are going to be super, super close. And we're working with drills. And even though we're going to go super slow with the drill, if for some reason you accidentally push a little bit harder than you would want to, you may cut yourself. So if this is your first time playing around with it, just go ahead and play with your drill before using the wire on it to kind of get a feel for the pressure. And then you can go ahead and dive in. I'm going to just slowly start my drill, go slower than quicker. See how it's wrapping around now? And I'm just holding my wire here to make sure that they are getting tight and close together. I may have to pull the wire towards the jump rings to make them tighter fit. So just kind of keep your eye on it. See what you're doing to make tight, small jump rings. See how slow I'm going? I don't want you to go any faster than this until you get super comfortable with this technique. Take a break if you need to. Holding this wire can be a little bit difficult, and you kind of have to put some muscle into it, especially towards the edge, because the wire just wants to just go completely straight up, so it's going to fight your hands on it. Now I think I'm pretty much done, and I'm not going to worry about this little excess here. It was getting really hard to push down, and that's okay. If I need to make more jump rings, I'm just going to go ahead and start with a new wire and just start from scratch. It's just not worth me bending all that wire, and it's just going to get too hard to do. So next, I'm going to go ahead and just move to make sure that the ends here are pointing downward. And I'm going to put my finger over this because these little babies, when we clip it off, tends to fly. So I'm just going to lightly have my finger bracing over it. And I'm going to clip off the top part in the trash immediately. And then we just slide it off. And of course, for this step, I highly recommend using our safety goggles. But I'm a little bit of a daredevil, as you can see. Go ahead and just get rid of all that other sharpness. We don't need it anymore. And for jump rings, I've already made a couple of little spools here. The next step, I'm gonna get out a little container because these little guys can get messy. And see right here where we ended? That's gonna be my guide. And I'm just gonna go ahead and snip the first layer. Voila! You have one jump ring. Again, use the end of where your wire ends as your guide and snip one layer at a time. And you're just gonna go all the way up. So now you have your jump rings, and I put them all in a container here because they're small and we don't want to lose any of them. So how do we make a chain? So I'm going to show you how to do that, and I'm just taking my flat nose pliers right here. I'm going to shake out a couple, not that many. Okay, so I have quite a few here. What I like to do is I take usually 2 smaller pliers and I just twist them in opposite ways to release. And then I'm going to go ahead and just add one in here. And to secure, I'm just going to go ahead and twist the same way back. To really secure it, I'll kind of sandwich it in and then just push the 2 ends together. You'll want to make sure that you have your jewelry magic on your tools when you do this because it could totally mar up and you'll see little cuts and no one wants that on their little jump rings. Want everything to look nice and pristine. And you just keep doing that until I just kind of measured my hand how long I would need. And through the magic of the internet, we already have one that's quite long. I might have to add a few more. But as you can see, I just kind of measured the length from my wrist all the way down to my middle finger from where we're going to have our chain. I'm going to add a few more chains to extend this. I want a little bit more so we can always take away. And if you need to make more jump rings, then go ahead and do so. Take the time. We are going to be adding some beads in our chain, but I'm not exactly sure how many of our little jump rings we're going to need. So I'm just going to go ahead and just make a whole bunch and make our chain super long, and we can always adjust it and take off as we need. I'm giving it a good tug just to make sure everything is secure and steady. For our chain ring bracelet, we don't want it to be too tight because we want our hands to be able to flex and move and dance around and all that good stuff. So if it's super tight, it's going to break more easily. So it's okay if your chain is a little bit more loose. Next up, we're going to take out our bead that we're going to use for our chain. You can use as many beads as you want. I'm just going to use one to show you something simple, but of course I want you guys to get creative with it. And I'm going to show you how to make this bead into a chain link bead. I'm just going to take out some wire. Again, I'm making this way longer than it needs to be, just in case we mess up or do anything like that. We have room for error. Go ahead and thread that through somewhere in the middle, at least so you have similar amount of slack on each side. Take out your tiny, tiny round nose pliers. And I'm just going to play around with it to see where it looks good, but I'm going to start bending maybe around here. Take your time. Just keep bending the wire. And see how I made it almost completely loop over itself sideways? And we can make it even smaller if we want, or bigger. whatever you like. Just using my other pliers here to straighten it out because I don't want it on the side, but I do like the size of this. I also find that clamping this hole that we just made down helps a lot with our next step, which is I'm just going to take my fingers. You guys are welcome to use your pliers if you want, but I'm just going to bend it around. Because I'm using a thicker wire for this, I'm probably just going to do it once or twice. If you had a thinner wire that you're working with, you're welcome to do as many loops as you want. You can even go onto the bead and make it more, you know, detailed looking or whatever you like. So our little loops here almost look like the jump loops that the jump rings that we made with our drill. Very, very tight and close together. That's kind of what we want. I'm snipping at a diagonal, so it won't be so easy to see the little edges there. And of course we can go in and kind of cover those up by wrapping them around even closer to the bead. Okay, so it's now time for the next side of the bead, and I'm going to show you a different way to do it. And you just hold your wire and loop around. Voila! So that's two different ways to wrap your bead. A next big part of our chain ring bracelet is the chain. And we're not going to use any store-bought materials for any of our projects because we want you to learn how to make everything homemade, and it's going to be awesome and just as good as you would buy it in store, and it's going to be way cheaper.